Hello everybody and welcome to the Gaming Grappler. Before I get this review started for Pizza Tower, I just want to get this quick little rant about Nintendo out of the way. And while I love Nintendo, one of my biggest problems with this company is that Nintendo tends to hold on to intellectual property like their Smaug the Dragon from Lord of the Rings. They will hold on to franchises for sometimes decades at a time without really doing anything with them. And I want you to think about this. F-Zero GX, the last mainline F-Zero game, came out 20 years ago. What if you're a fan of RPGs like the Mother series? Mother 3 came out 17 years ago. Or what about Wario Land? Wario Land is the primary influence and inspiration behind Pizza Tower. The last mainline Wario Land game came out 15 years ago. And the main point I'm trying to make is that fans of these old legacy series are getting old. Like 21 years is enough time for somebody to grow up, go to college, and start a family. And none of this is happening in a vacuum because indie developers are taking up the mantle and replacing these legacy series with their own original concepts and ideas that borrow heavily from the original games that Nintendo created. And 15 to 20 years is long enough for new gamers to be completely oblivious about the primary inspiration for games like Undertale. And as a result of that, Nintendo is probably losing millions of dollars from their inability to just make updated versions of their legacy series. This mentality from Nintendo just doesn't make any sense to me. I want you to consider the fact that Nintendo is often in positions where they could easily generate millions of dollars without hardly putting in any effort. I want you to think for a second that there are a lot of Earthbound and Mother fans in the West, but for whatever reason, Nintendo hasn't taken the easy step of simply localizing and releasing an official version of a 2006 Game Boy Advance game. The only way to play Mother 3 is to illegally pirate the game and use a fan translation patch. That same fan translation patch got over 100,000 downloads within the first week it was released. That means that if Nintendo decided to officially localize and release Mother 3 for $10, that game would generate $1 million within its first week of release. Think about that for a second. Nintendo is in a position where thousands of fans are knocking on their door with bags full of money saying, "Help us, Nintendo. We have millions of dollars and we don't know what to do with it. Please take our money. Take this burden off our fans and take our money." And them looking at them and going, "No, we hate money. We don't know what to do with all that money. We don't like making free money." It just doesn't make any logical sense to me. As a company, they aren't using their primary motive of just generating money. This bizarre allergic reaction Nintendo has for easy profit has definitely cost them. It's no surprise that Undertale was directly based off of and inspired from Mother 3, and that game was such a huge success that Toby Fox has made enough money to play golf until he's dead, and Pizza Tower follows that same sort of logic. It was based off of Wario Land, but is significantly more improved than that series. And I mean, let's just take the nostalgia goggles off for a second. It's been 15 years, and fans of old-time video game series can often improve upon the formula and find out what works best. And over that 15-year time period, Pizza Tower improves upon the Wario Land formula and makes it better than its legacy series ever was. It just goes to show that if you're Nintendo, when you fall asleep at the wheel, don't be surprised when someone else starts driving. Well, now that I got that rant finished, I gotta get the self-promotion out of the way. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the Gaming Grappler. The more this channel grows, the more time, effort, and dedication I can bring into delivering you guys content on a consistent and regular basis. And I'd just like to thank you guys. My Armored Core for Answer video got over 40K views. It was a huge success, and that kind of thing motivates me to work harder on my next video. And for all you Armored Core fans out there, yes, I do plan on doing a follow-up to that video. But with that being said, let's start my review for Pizza Tower. Now, I know I'm breaking a lot of rules here by lumping the story and presentation into the same category, but I have a pretty good reason for doing this. Pizza Tower is a gameplay over story experience. It's a game that emulates the old school 2D side-scrolling platformers that came out in bulk in the 90s. It's a game that doesn't really tell its story through in-game cutscenes or dialogue trees, but primarily through its presentation. Pizza Tower prides itself as having phenomenal animations. And these animations do a lot to give character to who you're playing as and the world you're exploring. But at a baseline, this game's plot is mostly told in its introductory cutscene, which is phenomenal, I might add. You play as Peppino Spaghetti. Yeah, really, that's his name. And he is a Chad, a middle-aged Italian small pizzeria owner and a war vet, which you're only going to find out if you read the wiki. And a Lovecraftian pizza tower has manifested, and it threatens to destroy his small business. It is up to you, the player, to climb the tower, to finish all the levels, to defeat the bosses, and to destroy the evil pizza face. Again, the actual plot for this game was made to be as minimal as possible. Like the old school 16-bit and 32-bit game Pizza Tower was inspired by, the plot is just here to give enough context and motivation for the player to be doing what they're doing. What is more significant in this game is the presentation. At a first glance, Pizza Tower might look like a bit of a Wario Land knockoff, but you would be sorely mistaken. There's a lot more inspiration going on under the hood than just Wario Land for Pizza Tower. This game markets itself as being a love letter to 90s animations, and what a Herculean task that is, because objectively speaking, the 90s was the best era in Western animation. I'm not stating that as an opinion, but as a fact that cannot be argued. And the reason why the 90s was so good for animation was because this was when we had the highest level of technology and the highest level of expertise, animators who knew what they were doing, and all of these animations were mostly hand-drawn with very minimal computer interference. We had hit classics like Batman the Animated Series, Freakazoid, and even experimental shows like Ren and Stimpy that broke a lot of animation rules. And this was an era that had some of the most silky smooth animations out there. It was just a phenomenal time to be watching cartoons. However, Pizza Tower isn't just inspired from 90s cartoons and animations. The art style looks like it was made to resemble the cartoony platformers that came out on the Sega Genesis, games like Decap Attack and Toe Jam and Earl, but mostly Earthworm Jim. I mean, this game just looks like somebody played Level 8 from Earthworm Jim 2 and said, screw it, let's just base an entire game off of this level's premise. It also helps that both Earthworm Jim and Pizza Tower borrow from the same sound libraries. And just to wrap things back to the start of this segment, it should be noted that both Earthworm Jim and Pizza Tower were heavily influenced off of 90s cartoons and animations. And you can really see this in Pizza Tower. Our main character, Peppino, looks like he was highly inspired off of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Peppino looks incredibly anxious in the idle animations and in the file select screen, but he also looks powerful and erratic in combat, which is a joy to experience. It does a lot to give our main character a lot of personality. It shows us that while he is anxious and scared, he can be brave and courageous and rise to the challenge. It really makes our 40-year-old pizzeria owner look like a badass at the end of the day. As for this game's animation, the animation style for Pizza Tower looks like it was highly inspired off of Ren and Stimpy. And Ren and Stimpy was iconic for breaking all the classic animation rules. It was a show that would change its art style radically or go completely off model for the sake of comedy, and somehow it made it work. And this formula was so popular that it was replicated in other shows like SpongeBob and on a lot of online content creators. And what I find amazing about Pizza Tower is that while this game did take 5 years to make, boy does it show. The animation is inspired, it's fluid, it looks cool, it's funny to look at, and it does a lot to give our characters a lot of personality. And for that, I have to applaud the creators for this game. The gameplay and level design for Pizza Tower is a lot more than just a simple Wario Land knockoff. For starters, Pizza Tower may have Wario Land's unique level design, but you do it with Sonic's unique speed and momentum. And there is a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog influence here, especially in Peppino's run animation, where if you go at high speeds, Peppino's legs form the same sort of figure 8 formation we see in 2D Sonic games. There's also boost pads, and there's even a boosting mechanic similar from the 3D modern Sonic games, where you could instantly destroy enemies when you reach top speed. And it's pretty cool, but this is a deadly sort of combination. Sonic's speed and momentum make exploring Wario Land's open-ended, non-linear levels a lot more fun and exciting. If I had to briefly summarize the gameplay loop for Pizza Tower's level design, I would say it's about exploring open-ended levels and then speedrunning your way back to the start of those levels. And a matter of fact, both Pizza Tower and Wario Land have this completely unique and original take to level design that I haven't really seen in any other gaming franchise out there, where every stage in the game is divided into two halves. The first half of every stage is a non-linear Metroidvania-like type of experience, where the player is incentivized to find all the hidden collectibles and to memorize the layout of the map. It's during this point in the gameplay that the player can't even enter a failure state. You can take as much damage as you can without dying, and you can fall down pits without dying. The only real failure state that the player will encounter is that their score total will be reduced, or the game might mock you. It's only during the second half of every stage that the player can enter a failure state, and that failure state is a timeout. The second half of a stage starts when the player destroys Pillar John, where a Metroid-style timer will go off, where the player will have to haul ass back to the start of the level. The map will change, certain exits and routes will be blocked off, and the player will be judged on their ability to move quickly and then to reach the end of the stage without dying. The only way you can die is with that timer reaching its conclusion. As you can imagine, the fact that the second half of every stage operates off a timer incentivizes the player to move as quickly as possible, and the core gameplay accounts for this. When you hold down the run button, Pepito will move so quickly, he'll break the sound barrier. It just annihilate everything in front of him. And the mobility options in this game are plentiful. And I would argue that Pizza Tower is one of the fastest 2D side-scrolling platformers that I have ever played. I'm even going to throw them up there with the classic 2D Sonic games. But Pizza Tower is a lot more fair than the classic Sonic games. It fixes a lot of problems with Sonic's gotcha level design. While I do love the classic Sonic games, one of my biggest issues with those games is that first playthrough can be a little unfair. A lot of player death will be as a result of enemies and obstacles suddenly popping into frame, sort of like a jump scare. And how Pizza Tower levels the playing through is the fact that on the first half of every stage, the player can't even encounter a failure state. It's a safe environment for the player to explore and memorize the layout of the stage and account for the types of enemies that they'll be fighting. Which means that on the second half of the stage, where the player will finally be tested and finally be possible to encounter a failure state, the playing field will be level. They'll know the layout of the level, and they'll know what they're fighting. So it feels more fair when you die on that first playthrough. One of the things I love about Pizza Tower is that it has a unique approach to how it tackles difficulty. This is a game that's easy to learn, but also hard to master. It's a game that, while everybody may be able to finish Pizza Tower, not everybody is going to beat this game, while also getting a good score. This is an arcade-focused experience where the player is incentivized to go fast, to perform well, and to get a good score. The only way to encounter a failure state is during the second half of every stage, where the player can get a time over and just flat out lose the level, or during boss fights, where the gameplay is a little different. The player gets a health bar, and these boss fights are often very challenging. But other than that, Pizza Tower would much rather punish the player by attacking your ego and rather give you a low score and then make fun of you for performing poorly. The real challenge, the real difficulty to playing Pizza Tower is in trying to get a perfect ranking, and the best way to do that is to have a combo meter sustained and uninterrupted from the start of a stage to the end of the stage, which is completely possible, I might add, but I must say that this is a very difficult thing to actually accomplish. Again, while taking damage won't kill you, it'll kill your combo meter. And as a result of that, if the player wants to sustain this combo, they are going to have to memorize the layout of every stage, find all the hidden collectibles and power-ups, and then find a methodology of doing all of that in the correct order. And as you can imagine, that is incredibly difficult. But again, one of the things I love about Pizza Tower is this unique approach to difficulty is completely optional based on how the player wants to play the game. What I love is the second lap feature. Basically, during the second half of every stage, while your Metroid-style timer is going off, you have the option to repeat the second half of every stage while that timer is still running. This means that the player will have to move as incredibly quickly as possible and be able to do this twice. And I just love this feature of the game, and I've had a blast with this methodology of difficulty. I just want to give the developers a round of applause too, because every stage in this game has some sort of unique gameplay mechanic to it. No stage plays the same as the last stage, where your main character, Peppino, could transform into like a new object or a character, where you'll turn into a knight in shining armor or a ghost that moves through objects, and the list just goes on. Sometimes you're given control of a new character altogether, like Gustavo or Brick, that have their own unique moveset that's fun to play and enjoy. Sometimes there'll be new interactables in a level. Sometimes you're given a gun and the game just turns into like Contra. So overall, no unique level plays the same as another level. And I'm just amazed at the variety in every stage. It must have cost the developers a lot of time, considering that to make new animations for every transformation that Peppino can morph into. The levels are fun to explore simply because of the magnitude of how big your moveset is in this game. Your mobility options are off the charts in this game. Peppino kind of controls like if Wario from Wario Land had sonic speed and momentum, but with cartoon logic layered on top of it. Peppino's large moveset can all be chained together to maintain speed and momentum. You have a boost run in this game, just like in the newer 2D Sonic games. Basically, once Peppino's legs reach a figure 8 formation, you can instantly destroy enemies by running through them. But one of my favorite things is that the enemies will scream on in terror as you annihilate them. But unlike the newer 2D Sonic games, the player has a greater degree of control and accuracy while controlling Peppino in these segments. Like, for example, while you're boosting at max speed, you can turn on a dime 180 degrees while still keeping your max speed. And while there is a very slight learning curve to doing this, it's a really amazing ability that allows you to climb vertical segments that you wouldn't be able to do in a Sonic game while still maintaining your speed and momentum. You can also run up 90-degree walls without a slope, pretty much as long as you're jumping or performing an action near a wall. You can scale it. You can also dive and roll under tight crevices. And all of these abilities can be chained together while still maintaining your speed and momentum. You can also super jump in this game and perform a Metroid Shine Spark, and that's just what I'm going to call it because these animations are borderline plagiarized. You know, just like Sonic, there are speed traps in this game, but because of how big your moveset is, there's so many different ways you can deal with it. Like, if an enemy jumps in front of you, as long as you're going max speed, you can just destroy it by running through it. And even if you're not at max speed, you could turn 180 degrees and move backwards. And again, speed traps like hitting a booster that sets you in the opposite direction isn't too much a penalty in this game because of that 180-degree turn. I would also like to mention that Peppino's moveset isn't just regulated to his mobility options. While his mobility options are plentiful, his actual hand-to-hand combat skills are immense. Like Peppino, despite the way he looks, is a bit of a grappler. The things you can do when you grab an enemy are hilarious. Like, you can grab an enemy and throw it at other enemies or obstacles, or you can perform a spinning pile driver that will annihilate everything beneath you. You can also perform a dragon punch. But aside from that, one of my favorite combat abilities is the taunt system. That's right, your taunt in this game is also a parry. And what's great about this is that it means you can basically keep your entire speed and momentum throughout the entirety of the game, so long as you master this one mechanic. And again, it is fairly difficult. Like, the parry window is actually pretty small in this game, but it's a well reward considering how overpowered the player is, that they'll destroy most enemies by just getting at a top speed. The fact that there's this secondary mechanic layered underneath it for more technical players to master is pretty cool in my opinion. Speaking of combat, the gameplay for all the bosses in Pizza Tower is radically different than the gameplay for all the stages in Pizza Tower. And obviously, I've said this before, but the player isn't invincible during boss fights. You have a health bar and you can die now. What might not be so obvious is the fact that the boss fights in this game are significantly more challenging than the stages. And I mean, I can't quantify this, but the bulk of my deaths during that first playthrough were during the boss fights. And it's a joy to fight these bosses over and over again because every boss in this game has a unique and distinct silhouette from one another. The character designs are iconic and the animations are phenomenal, which is good because every boss fight in this game has more than one phase to them. And what I love about going through these phases is just seeing what crazy animation will be beautifully shown on display during them. But by far, my favorite boss fight of this game was the final boss fight. And I'm not going to show you because it's a massive spoiler, but it was really a beautiful way to send off the experience. And one of my favorite things is that this final boss subverts your expectations, but in a good way. It does a thing that in most other games are the worst kind of thing imaginable, but somehow it just makes it work. And the only people who know what I'm talking about are people who have already played the game or have already looked up the spoilers on YouTube. But let me just say that when Pepito gets mad, the game gets elevated to a whole nother level. Music and sound. And listen, I'm going to try to keep this sequence brief. We are way over time now in this video, but let it be known that the soundtrack to Pizza Tower is amazing. Overall, the soundtrack has this groovy, upbeat atmosphere that is reminiscent of the music you will have heard in 90s cartoons and video games. And what I love is the sheer amount of hard work and effort the developers put for the music in this game. Like, every level has a unique track to that, and within every level, there are variations of that same track. Like, if you enter a secret room, the music will change to a different variation of that track. During the second half of a stage, a new variation of the track will play. But one of my favorite things is the music they play during the escape sequences, where the music will ramp up in intensity the closer and closer you are to the exit or the farther the time meter has gone on. Overall, the soundtrack for this game is amazing. It's the kind of thing that I'll listen to while I'm on the way to the gym or I'm doing chores in the house. It was just that good. All right, so we finally have made it to the finish line of this review. And I'm going to do something a little different because normally I don't rank a game after I have played it. Normally I like to review a game, give you my thoughts and opinions, and then let the viewer decide their own opinion of how well a game is. But after playing Pizza Tower and beating this game multiple occasions, I have to say that Pizza Tower is an example of a game that has reached perfection. It's a 2D side-scrolling platformer, and it has perfectly executed that formula to perfection. This game has good combat and level design. The music is phenomenal. It's creative and inventive. And after playing this game multiple times, I really can't deny it at this point. Pizza Tower is perfection. For $25, you really can't go wrong. There's no reason why you should just buy this game after seeing this review and play it for yourself. I guarantee you'll have a good time with it.